What's up guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video here on the channel. Today, I'm going to talk about the Alfonso Triguero's case. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And don't forget to turn on notifications button. Now, without further ado, let's go to the video. Logrosán is a small town located in Cáceres in Spain. The city is one of those typical European small towns in the interior, with an estimated population of less than 2,000 inhabitants. Most of these residents live in rural houses, where they practice agriculture and also breed farm animals. Because it is such a small town, everyone, sooner or later, gets to know each other. The place was also seen as very safe, as nothing shocking had never happened. There are no robberies, there is no crime. And there was rarely a small argument, but nothing that the townspeople were nervous about. However, that all changed on Dawn Valentine's Day Eve. Rosa Duran, a local resident, called the police, claimed that some man had broken into her home and shot her husband. In the call received at 3:09 a.m., Rosa screams asking for help to save the life of her husband, Alfonso Triguero, while her son, Jose Carlos, squeezes the wound in an attempt to stop the bleeding and prevent his father's death. A civil guard team and paramedics were quickly dispatched to the family's home, located at Avenida Hernandez Serrano number 18. Alfonso was rescued alive, but unfortunately, the shot that hit him in the right side of the chest was close range as fatal, and he died on the way to the hospital. This fact caused a great impact in the small town of Logrosán, and the residents couldn't believe that a crime of this proportion had happened there. Alfonso Triguero was a very successful businessman, and his entire family was well known in the city and also in the region. He owned several companies, including a market, a farm, a butcher shop, and even a nightclub. However, in the recent years, he was dedicating all his time to a restaurant called El Cortijo del Jamón, which had even recently won an award for Best Rural Company. He had been married to Rosa Duran for over 30 years, and together they had 2 children, Jose Carlos, 28, and Ana, 20. The 4 were seen as a model family, who loved and above all respected each other. The family lived in a 3-story luxury home, designed and built to Alfonso's taste. In her first statement, Rosa stated that she was sleeping in the room with Alfonso, and that she woke up startled by a very loud noise around 3 a.m. In a daze, she guessed it was a car accident on the street, or an explosion. She then quickly got up and realized that Alfonso, who was sleeping next to her in bed, was seriously injured. Scared, Rosa ran out into the hallway of the house, screaming for her son, saying that Alfonso was very hurt. At the same time, the couple's son, Jose Carlos, who was sleeping in the next room, woke up and went to see what was going on. He came across his desperate mother in the hallway, and when he went with her to his parents' room, he saw his father lying down with a shotgun next to him. Without thinking twice, Jose Carlos took the shotgun and ran down the stairs, and that's when he saw the main door of the house was open. Jose Carlos confirmed his mother's statement and added that when he looked outside, he saw several people running to a red Hyundai vehicle with an old license plate. Jose managed to memorize the numbers on that license plate and passed that on to the police. He was also able to provide some physical details of the suspects who were in the car. According to him, the driver was a blonde woman, and next to her was a middle-aged Caucasian man. Anna, the couple's older daughter, had gone back to her college dorm the day before, where she stayed from Monday to Friday, and only returned to her parents' house at the weekends. As the crime happened from Sunday to Monday, she was not at home and couldn't help the police with information. The case was initially treated as a robbery gone wrong, where the criminals ended up taking Alfonso's life. During the investigations, it was discovered that the amount of 4,500 euros that was in an envelope was missing from the house. This amount referred to a profit collected at the weekend from the family business. Several drawers of some furniture in the house were rummaged, which indicated that the criminals searched a lot for something of value. In all, forensics spent 16 hours examining the crime scene. They searched every part of the house, collecting various fingerprints, footprints, DNA samples, and gunpowder remains, totaling 126 pieces of evidence of the crime, including the closest that Rosa and Jose Carlos were, the bed sheets, and even the shotgun. Early on, some details of the crime scene caught the attention of investigators. These details were subtle, but they were essential to solving the case later on. At first, it was noted that even stating that the door of the house was open, there were no signs of forced entry, either on the door or the windows, which suggested that either the criminals had the keys to the property or that someone inside the house had opened the door for them. In the middle of the room, Rosa's purse had been found, which contained money, credit cards, and checkbooks, which had clearly not been touched by the criminals, which was strange since the purpose of the crime was supposedly robbery. This made investigators wonder, why didn't the criminals take the purse that was right under their noses? On top of the kitchen counter, there was a piece of meat that, according to Rosa and Jose Carlos, was not there when they went to bed. This meat would have been used by the criminals to get the attention of the family dog, which was trapped inside one of the bathrooms in the house, and therefore it was not possible to hear its barks when the criminals invaded the place. But how could Rosa and her son Jose Carlos not hear all the noise the criminals made when searching the house, and only woke up with the sound of the shot that Alfonso took? For the investigators, this was strange, since, according to the forensics, the way the house was messed up, the criminals must have made a lot of noise. When asked about it, Rosa and Jose Carlos remembered a strange fact that had happened the night before. According to them, before going to sleep, they and Alfonso had a glass of chocolate milk and found an unusual taste, a little bitter, but even so they drank all the milk. They told the police that possibly the criminals had put a sleeping pill on the milk they drank that night, and that's why they had a very heavy sleep, only waking up with the loud noise of the shot. While this possibility made sense, there were some points that didn't fit, and as the crime was the only one in that sleepy town, numerous police officers were assigned to investigate the case. The first thing to be checked was the license plate of the car and the suspect seen by Jose Carlos that night, since until then, it was the most solid lead they had at the moment. The investigators were able to trace the license plate reported by Jose, and the car belonged to his neighbor across the street. Furthermore, the descriptions that Jose gave the police of the suspects matched those of his neighbors. Because of this, the police decided to carry out an analysis on the car of the suspects who were these neighbors, and also collect fingerprints from them, but no evidence of gunpowder or anything else that linked them to the crime was found. In testimony, the neighbor said that really that night she left by car with her husband, but they only went for a walk around the city. And yes, they confirmed that they went for a walk at 3 a.m., but they justified it by saying that it was Valentine's Day, and also that region is very peaceful and there was no danger. After doing investigation, the police were able to confirm that the two neighbors had no involvement in the case, and they were ruled out as suspects. But perhaps the main point of the investigation was over the shotgun, which was the murder weapon, and it was a weapon that was already inside the house. The police discovered that this weapon belonged to Alberto, Anna's boyfriend, the other daughter of the couple, and would have been lent to Jose Carlos 2 days before, as he would use it to hunt. In that region, having firearms and hunting was something very common, but what was unusual in this case was that the criminals had invaded the house, located the shotgun, shot Alfonso, and left the weapon inside the house. Why wouldn't the criminals have just taken their own gun? Why didn't they take the shotgun with them? And how did they know that there was a shotgun? From that point on, investigators began to suspect that perhaps Anna and her boyfriend Alberto were behind the crime. Investigators theorized that when Anna returned to college dorm, Alberto, who knew where the gun was in the house, went there, picked it up, and shot his father-in-law. According to investigators, the reason would be Alfonso not approving of his daughter's relationship with Alberto, and that he had already made it clear several times. Alberto would even been forbidden by Alfonso to enter the family's home, and he was never invited to the parties and events that the family promoted. I didn't find out why Alfonso didn't approve of his daughter's relationship with Alberto. Anyway, here at this point the investigators believed the case was pretty much solved, but it wasn't. Alberto lived far from the family's residence and the crime scene, and he also had an alibi, proving that he didn't leave his house throughout the night. As for Anna, it was also proven that she did not leave her college dorm, and as there was no physical evidence linking them to the crime, the two were ruled out as suspects. Despite the police's frustration at not having solved the crime in a timely manner, they were not discouraged and decided to investigate deeper into the rich and perfect Triguero family. During these investigations, they discovered that even though Alfonso had several successful companies paying his employees and suppliers correctly, he had incurred a huge debt through borrowing money. According to the police, Alfonso owed more than 100,000 euros, divided into at least 3 loans with different people. He had taken out these loans at a time when his companies were in crisis, and he wanted to keep up appearances. In another statement, Rosa, Alfonso's wife, told investigators that perhaps the motive for the crime could have been her husband's debt, and that the criminals could be mercenaries hired to end his life. Investigators found this theory plausible, but for them, mercenaries would bring their own weapons, as they would have no way of knowing that in the house there was a shotgun. Also, they would have broken down the main door of the house and not known about the dog. Still, during the investigations, the police discovered that the family's life had already become chaotic for some time, and they were sinking in debt. Alfonso tried to hide this from his children, who had no idea how much money their father owed. To make matters worse, in the recent months, Rosa had taken out some loans, totaling more than 60,000 euros. She even asked the people from whom she took that money not to tell her husband. That is, in addition to the debt of 100,000 euros that Alfonso himself acquired to maintain his companies, there was also a debt of 60,000 euros made by his wife. And that wasn't all. Investigators also discovered that the family actually lived on the appearances, and that although everyone thought they were a perfect family, within the walls of the house, they were completely different. Alfonso Triguero had several lovers since the beginning of his relationship with his wife Rosa. Rosa always knew about this, but she never cared since her husband had money and provided her with a great life. However, in recent years, Alfonso was no longer satisfied with just his mistresses and wanted to try something new. He then began to frequent those places where call girls provided services per hour. Here where I live, people call these places the cousins' houses, where even the ugliest men find attractive company, paying of course. Well, in addition of frequenting these places, Alfonso had also started to take pictures of the women he hired and saved these photos in his cell phone. Rosa found these photos on her husband's cell phone and was not happy about it. After completing the investigation at the family home, it was found that all drawers that had been rummaged through only had a single fingerprint, which belonged to Rosa Duran. In the cartridge of the bullet that was fired in the crime, there was also Rosa's fingerprint, and in the gun, there was only the DNA of Jose Carlos, the son of the couple that was in the house. Furthermore, the pajamas Jose Carlos was wearing the night had evidence of gunpowder. Questioned by investigators about this, he tried to explain himself, saying that the day before the crime, he had gone hunting, and that he was wearing his pajamas under his hunting clothes, and that was why he had evidence of gunpowder on his clothes, and his DNA was on the shotgun. Jose Carlos had indeed gone hunting on the day before the crime. He even took some photos and showed them to the investigators, but there was a problem. In these photos, it was evident that he was not wearing any pajamas under his hunting clothes. The sheet on the bed Alfonso slept on with Rosa had traces of blood on the side where Rosa should have been, and her clothes didn't have any spills. This meant that she was already on her feet when the shot that took her husband's life was fired, because if she was still lying on the bed, as she said in her testimony, it was for Alfonso's blood to have spattered her. After all these discoveries and some findings by the forensics, the investigators concluded the following. That night, Rosa would have agreed with her son Jose Carlos that together they would take Alfonso's life. They then waited for the victim to sleep, and at dawn, Rosa got up, while Jose Carlos went to his parents' room and fired the gun at Alfonso, who was sleeping. Then they turned the whole house over, put the family dog inside the bathroom, and opened the main door of the residence. All this to simulate an invasion. But there was a mistake on the part of Jose and Rosa Carlos here. Neither of them came out of the house screaming for help, something that according to the police anyone who was in that situation would do. Still, according to the police, mother and son committed the crime with the intention of receiving the value of Alfonso's life insurance that he had taken out a few months before. This insurance would pay a good amount for Rosa, and she would still receive a widow's pension. The fact that Alfonso had started going to those cowgirl places left Rosa afraid that this would damage his reputation. And with the insurance, the family would be able to settle the debts and go back to having the luxurious life they were used to. On June 27, 2011, Rosa Duran and Jose Carlos were arrested, accused of having committed a crime against Alfonso Triguero. Although there was a lot of evidence that pointed to the two as responsible for the crime, the family and the entire local community refused to believe that they were in fact guilty. Once inside the prison, Jose Carlos decided to tell another version, stating that he had no involvement in the crime. He said he previously claimed it was a burglary because his mother had convinced him before the police arrived that the crime was a burglary and that someone had entered the house. He also said that he only woke up after hearing the gun go off and that his mother was already in the hallway, stating that his father had been shot by an assailant. Investigators, finding this version strange, asked him if he really thought that his mother alone would be able to take his father's life. Jose Carlos said yes, and said that in the recent months his mother had become more jealous of his father, even more so because she found the pictures of several girls on his cell phone. Even with the new version of Jose Carlos, he remained in prison, since the evidence indicated that he did have full participation in the crime. As a result, both he and his mother were held in prison awaiting their trials. However, in the summer of 2012, both were released to answer for the crime in freedom, after their lawyers convinced the justice that the two did not pose a danger to society. They also had to post bail worth 45,000 euros each. In September 2014, the first hearing of Rosa and her son Jose Carlos took place. Before the judge, Jose Carlos recanted his previous version and returned to support his mother's version that criminals had invaded the family home and took Alfonso's life. Both he and his mother said that they were innocent, and Rosa went so far as to explain that she was not lying in bed when Alfonso was shot because she had circulation problems and was sleeping on a mat on the floor at the time. However, it was pointed out by the authorities that there was no mattress in the house, so much so that the housekeeper herself testified that Rosa would never have slept on any mattress. More than 30 witnesses and more than 40 experts were heard. The case was digitally reconstructed, proving that the version supported by the two defendants was improbable in light of the evidence. On September 25, 2014, the jury found Rosa and Jose Carlos guilty of the crime, and they were sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. However, the judge in charge of the case claimed that since they could still appeal the sentence and didn't present risks to society, the two could continue to respond in freedom, but they should hand over their passports, and every week they should appear in court to show that everything was fine. On October 10, 2014, Jose Carlos was supposed to appear before this judge, but he didn't appear in court, and when they went after him, they discovered that he had fled. Days before, Rosa had sold the market and the family restaurant, and Jose Carlos had taken all the money in cash along with several clothes. Apparently, Jose Carlos escaped across the border between Spain and Portugal, as his car was left in a nearby village. From that moment on, Jose Carlos became an international fugitive. The escape lasted about 3 months, and in January 2015, Jose Carlos was captured when a team of civil guards stopped and searched a bus in Portugal. Unfortunately, the exact location where he was found was not reported, but he would have been caught because the civil guard's sniffer dog pointed to the backpack he was carrying, and when they opened it, an amount of narcotics and 7,600 euros were found. When they asked of his documents, José Carlos was identified and arrested. Rosa Duran, on the other hand, appealed to the Supreme Court, and in 2015, her sentence was annulled and she was found not guilty. The argument used by the court was that although her fingerprint was on the gun's cartridge, that didn't prove anything, as she could have caught the bullets while she was cleaning the closet. Her DNA wasn't found on the murder weapon, so she wasn't the one who fired the shot. As there was no evidence against her to prove that she had engineered the whole thing, and there was also no laws against a mother covering up for her child, she was found not guilty and returned to her normal life. José Carlos, according to sources, is still in prison serving his sentence. But what about you? Do you believe in Rosa's innocence, or do you think she actually architected everything? Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching until the end, best wishes, and I see you next time.